So some warnings before starting into this. A lot of this is just a matter of opinions and taste and viewpoints. It's mainly just me noticing patterns, at least me and some people I know. And all of this is really to be stated as facts, just thoughts. So a lot of this is really up to interpretation. And if you don't necessarily see things the same way as I state in this video, then that's fine for you to say so. And as I also said, this is also going to be a history of Cartoon Network's quote-unquote ages. While that part is a bit more fact-based, I'm going to be using a lot of fan terminology rather than official things that have been said, because they've never really officially said anything. But yeah, just knowing that, let's start the video off. And as if you read in the title, it's about the possibility of Cartoon Network heading into another quote-unquote dark age. And I'm just going to explain that by giving the brief history course. So in the beginning, in the 90s, Cartoon Network was made. And at first they were just rerunning a bunch of old stuff from Hanna-Barbera and such. And then it wasn't until 1996 where they started running stuff like The Moxie Show and Cartoons. And it's from that later show where we started birthing stuff such as Dexter's Lab, which was what really kicked it all off. Following that, we got stuff like Johnny Bravo, Powerpuff Girls, Ed and Eddie, and Courage. This period of the late 90s is what's known as the Golden Age by fans mostly. And this age is very renowned, it's very heavily looked back on and loved. It's been that way for a long time. People love this age and its bumpers and its shows and the Cartoon Friday stuff. It's still pretty fun to look back at this time. Then by the time you get to the 2000s, it slows down a bit, their tone change with the bumpers and stuff. And if you ask me, this is where the Golden Age kind of ended. I should clarify right now, there's not a set start and end point for these. They kind of blend in, and there's a gradual change. But there's also periods of nothingness where it's just kind of its own empty thing and not really a Golden Age, or I mean not sort of any age at all. And this is kind of how I feel the earlier 2000s of Cartoon Network personally, especially 2003 and 2002. I don't know about everybody watching, but when I think back to this era, I just think about being really bored a lot. And a lot of the shows that were premiering then either just ended super fast or were barely aired at all, like Kids Next Door and Billy and Mandy being an exception. But CNC started at least. And if you ask me, I feel that by the time Foster's premiered, this is where we get to the point that I call the Silver Age. And this is another terminology that I've heard thrown around before. I didn't come up with it, and it's much less used than the Golden Age and another term that's coming up later. Well, I should say all the other terms, in fact. But yeah, this is that mid-2000s era of Foster's Home, Toonami at Saturday night, the CN City blocks. People love that latter part especially. And it's not as phenomenal or memorable or major. There's nothing super impactful that happened to change the network then. And it's just okay, I guess. Honestly, if you ask me, a lot of the shows that were coming on then, aren't that remarkable to look back at now, but maybe some of you enjoy them a bit more. And then we start to gradually turn down to the late 2000s, and this is coming up at what's the most known fan term age, the most infamous, the one that probably everybody has heard of. Things start to go a bit south for certain reasons by the time you reach 2007, 2008. And especially by 2008, even though this isn't really the start of it, it's what did you have then? Chowder was on, that's good. Flapjack started, and a bunch of other stuff either ended or was just barely being shown anymore, like Foster's. That ended in 2009 technically, but as far as I know, I don't think viewers of that show were the biggest fans of the latest episodes. And then Ed and Eddie was kind of over, like it just had its lost episode and then the movie next year. And then 2009, this is the one everybody knows, CN Real started, and this is what kicked off what's been known as the Dark Age. And this was that time where all of their shows were basically failing, and CN Real was the thing, and nobody was happy. Now, of course, Adventure Time started early in this, being spring 2010, and then regular show followed about half a year later in September. And yeah, while those two shows are considered some of the best ones to premiere on the network so far, it didn't immediately end in the Dark Age. It had to gradually fix it as time went on. Like, we were still in the Dark Age, technically in 2011, even though, like, Gumball premiered by then. Now, if you ask me, the Dark Age ended when Steven Universe premiered. Like, it was gradually getting better, especially in 2012 with the 20th anniversary stuff. Like, oh wow, the shit they did then was actually really cool in hindsight. But yeah, other people have said this, the Dark Age seemed to die with Steven Universe. And that's also when they stopped showing, like, the CN Real stuff, and that was kind of, like, the big, like, set-off mark. It's like, okay, we're done doing this, we're actually gonna be good again now. And we were left with Adventure Time, regular show, and Gumball. And this new show that just premiered would also go on to be a major part of the network's history. And this is what started what I like to call, and many others like to call, the Renaissance Age. Cartoons got fucking amazing in the mid-2010s, not just on Cartoon Network, but elsewhere, like with Gravity Falls and early Rick and Morty. Like, it was a great, exciting time to see cartoons and just how they were developing and trying new things and putting a really big focus on writing quality and humor and character development and such. And they really loved their foreshadowing back then too. And we also got other shows such as, like, Clarence, which is a lighter example that was alright if you ask me, and We Bare Bears, which I loved, and I feel like that was probably, like, the last, like, major Renaissance show to come on for Cartoon Network. Now, if it's a gradual end, and I'm sure most people have mixed answers if you were to ask them, but I kind of feel like that the Renaissance Age had its, like, more official end probably by, like, 2016-ish, I would say, around, like, the latter part of that. I guess maybe the start of, like, 2017, you could say. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of where we got in, like, another, like, blank middle area, like, in the early 2000s and the part before the Silver and Dark Age. And right now, I feel like that we're in, like, a Silver Age 2 for Cartoon Network, where the shows coming out aren't having these huge impacts per se, but they're still okay stuff. Like, I actually haven't really been watching Cartoon Network or paying that much attention or caring as much as I did during the Renaissance Age. And a lot of people I know have, like, been doing the same. I don't know if it's just because we found something else to do, or if it is just from not liking the shows as much. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't good stuff on here. In fact, I think this current Silver Age is way better than the first one, if you ask me. Like, I mean, there's stuff like Craig of the Creek and stuff, and Victor and Valentino, and I don't think those shows are too bad, even though I'm not into them. Like, there's nothing inherently horribly wrong with them, except for maybe Victor and Valentino's characterization, and especially the skinny one's fucking voice. But otherwise, they have a lot of cool ideas in them. And then I like Mau Mau, I don't even know if that's still going on. And then I don't think much arguments will be raised if you were to say that Infinity Train is just fucking amazing. Oh yeah, and I should also note a lot of the Renaissance Age cartoons are over by now. All of them, in fact. But yeah, it's definitely a better quality, but I still feel like it is, like, a Silver Age, since, like, a lot of it is just, like, unknowable on the sides, like, especially, like, all of the reboot stuff that nobody really talks about or cares about. And HBO Max is taking a lot of things. But yeah, overall, I think it's really good. Like, these are, like, the leftovers of the Renaissance Age, and it's good leftovers. Like, I kind of feel like OKKO was, like, the final note of the Renaissance Age specifically, and kind of, like, put the official end to it, even though it was, like, kind of already done by then. And then these new ones are just like fresh off the oven, but based on those. Similar to how Foster's is sometimes compared to the cartoons and Golden Age stuff, even though it came out much after. But now, since I mentioned all that good stuff, I do want to know again how there is on the side a lot of stuff that is less remarkable, to say the least, if you ask me. And how there's some other poor decisions that have been getting more egregious and noticeable to people from what I've heard, such as them discarding new ideas in favor of more reboots or spin-offs or whatever the fuck. And that's been worrying to some people, apparently. And all I'm saying is that the Renaissance Age and the Golden Age are very closely compared in terms of like quality stuff and impacts and all that. And like some even like kind of like argue amongst which could be better. And both happen to be followed up by some later ages. Now the only question I raise here is that will that pattern continue? Will Cartoon Network go from a great age to a fine one to a crap one? And that's just, well, maybe. But will it be as bad as they do? Probably not, because they're probably never going to do See Unreal again. That was the most egregious thing about it. But could it still be horribly unwatchable? Yes, if they just want to focus on stale content and not try out new things. However, I feel like unlike back then, there's much more of an awareness and people who will want to push for new and original content, especially if it seems like there's a lot of good work put into it. And people will be less accepting and more aware of them trying to rehash stuff or do bad ideas. And that basically answers the question that I asked in the video. A lot of this was just like the history stuff. So yeah, that about does it for my video, honestly. I just want to hear what you all think and what your opinions are on all of the shows they've had throughout the past, and what you think about this age concept. Bye-bye.